Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes the Medicis of the Middle East, how Israel could lose America. Iran executes 4 people on charges of spying for Israel. 2 investigations put renewed scrutiny on Israel's Gaza offensive. Who is Sigrid Kaag, the UN's new Gaza aid coordinator? The Medicis of the Middle East? Foreign Affairs. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, has ambitious goals of becoming a global power and offsetting its geographical vulnerability. The country has invested heavily in its military, established itself as a financial center, and forged relationships with various regional and global actors. Its efforts to diversify its economy, attract foreign investment, and build international partnerships have drawn comparisons to the Medicis, the dynastic powerhouse that ruled Florence and exerted influence through trade and banking. However, the UAE faces challenges such as its dependence on oil, the need to decarbonize, regional instability, and competition from neighboring countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. The country's autocratic governance model and its transactional approach to foreign relations also raise questions about its long-term stability and alliances. The UAE's strategic partnerships, particularly with the United States, have allowed it to project power and expand its influence. However, its willingness to forge connections with both Western and non-Western powers, such as China and Russia, indicates that it prioritizes its own interests and may switch allegiances as global power dynamics shift. The UAE's recent normalization of ties with Israel through the Abraham Accords demonstrates its focus on realpolitik and its shared concerns with Israel over regional security threats. The UAE's pursuit of economic diversification, technological development, and sustainability is part of its long-term vision for survival in a volatile region. However, it will need to address challenges such as labor exploitation, domestic dissent, and the impact of climate change to achieve its goals. While the UAE's current leadership under President Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ, has been effective in pursuing its ambitions, the country faces risks similar to those that eventually led to the decline of the Medicis. Internal feuds, regional competition, an unreliable security partner, and the effects of climate change could undermine the UAE's stability and power. To secure its future, the UAE will need to address its geopolitical limitations, strengthen regional integration, and find a balance between projecting power globally and ensuring its survival in a challenging neighborhood. How Israel could lose America. Foreign Affairs. Israel's reliance on the United States for support during its ongoing conflict with Hamas in Gaza has become increasingly apparent. While there have been tensions between the Biden administration and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the U.S. has continued to provide backing and assistance to Israel. However, there are signs that the U.S. is becoming more critical of Israel's actions, particularly regarding civilian casualties and the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Israel must carefully manage its relationship with the U.S. and address domestic political issues to ensure continued support. Additionally, Israel needs to formulate a clear position on the Palestinian issue and articulate its vision for the future. This will be crucial in maintaining its relationship with the U.S. and avoiding potential consequences if the U.S. were to impose conditions on military assistance. The article emphasizes that Israel has no viable alternative to the support it receives from the United States. Building relationships with other countries, such as China and Russia, is not an option for Israel, and recent statements from U.S. officials suggest that support for Israel is waning in other parts of the world. Israel must therefore prioritize national security over politics and address the concerns of the U.S. to maintain its friendship and support. The ongoing conflict with Hamas in Gaza has highlighted the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship. While the U.S. has expressed some concerns about Israel's actions, it has continued to provide support and assistance. However, Israel must be careful to manage its relationship with the U.S. and address domestic political issues to ensure continued support. Additionally, Israel must formulate a clear position on the Palestinian issue and articulate its vision for the future to maintain its relationship with the U.S. and avoid potential consequences if the U.S. were to impose conditions on military assistance. Iran executes 4 people on charges of spying for Israel. Financial Times. Iran has executed 3 men and 1 woman on charges of cooperating with Israeli intelligence services. The executions come amid escalating tensions between Israel and Iran, with both countries engaging in a shadow war across the Middle East. Israel has been accused of carrying out airstrikes on Iranian assets in Syria, while Iran has backed militant groups that have launched attacks against Israel. The recent conflict between Israel and Hamas has further exacerbated tensions, with Iran supporting Hamas and Israel claiming that Iran is at the center of many regional problems. 2 investigations put renewed scrutiny on Israel's Gaza offensive. Washington Post. 2 Israeli investigations have found that the Israel Defense Forces killed 3 Israeli hostages attempting to escape from Gaza. The investigations also found that a December strike on a Gaza refugee camp caused unintentional harm and damaged nearby buildings. The investigations addressed many of the points of criticism of Israel's Gaza offensive, both domestically and internationally, including the high number of civilian casualties and the government's failure to secure the release of the remaining hostages in Gaza. Hamas and allied fighters overran southern Israel on October 7, killing around 1,200 people and taking more than 200 hostage. A brief pause in fighting secured the release of 110 captives, but there are still more than 100 hostages remaining in Gaza. Israel's response to the attacks has led to the death of 21,507 people and injured 55,915 others in Gaza, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. The war has also resulted in almost 2 million people being displaced, with many struggling to access basic necessities. Who is Sigrid Kaag, the UN's new Gaza aid coordinator? Deutsche Welle. Sigrid Kaag, a former Dutch diplomat, has been appointed as the UN's senior humanitarian and reconstruction coordinator for Gaza. She will be responsible for coordinating and monitoring international emergency aid deliveries to the region, as well as establishing a UN mechanism to speed up deliveries through countries not involved in the conflict. Kaag is an experienced diplomat who has previously held high-ranking positions within the United Nations, including leading the mission to destroy Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles. Her appointment has not been welcomed by everyone in Israel, as she has been critical of Israeli policymaking in the past. Israel reportedly hits aid convoy, and thousands cram into dense Gaza areas as strikes continue. ABC. The UN has stated that Israel's bombardment has displaced 85% of the Gaza Strip's 2.3 million residents, leading to a sense of nowhere being safe in the tiny enclave. The Israeli military has widened its campaign and is now focused on the urban refugee camps of Burej, Nuzirat and Medicis in central Gaza, where Israeli warplanes and artillery have leveled buildings. Palestinian and Israeli cartoonists see the war differently, and the same. Washington Post opinion. During the recent conflict between Israel and Palestine, cartoonists from both sides have been expressing their opinions through their art. The Washington Post contacted 2 of these cartoonists, Michel Kitchka, an Israeli, and Mohammed Sabana, a Palestinian, to show their different points of view side by side. Both artists present sharp criticism of the indiscriminate killing of civilians, with Kitchka focusing on Hamas terrorists and Sabana focusing on the Israeli forces. This article highlights how cartoons can reveal shared empathy and human connection, even in the midst of conflict. Israel-Gaza war in 2024, signs of more devastation, open-ended occupation. South China Morning Post. The war aims of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Gaza's Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar look unattainable in 2024, and their fight may consign the Palestinian territory to yet more devastation and an open-ended Israeli occupation. Pressure on Netanyahu amid row over Israel's planned 4-day after Gaza war. Al Jazeera. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cancelled a meeting of Israel's war cabinet that was meant to discuss the plan for the day after the war due to opposition from far-right members of the coalition. The cancellation comes as Netanyahu faces growing pressure from his right-wing coalition government amid sharp disagreements over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The war cabinet was also meant to discuss a deal with Hamas about exchanging captives for Palestinian prisoners. The cancellation of the meeting highlights a divide between the military establishment and the political elite in Israel. Beyond Medicis, what controversial weapons has Israel used in Gaza war? Al Jazeera. An Israeli official has admitted that the country's military used inappropriate munitions during an attack on the Medicis refugee camp that killed at least 90 people earlier this week. The official said that the country's military will investigate what happened, but while little is known about the specific munitions used in Medicis, this is not the first time that Israel's army has faced criticism over the alleged or confirmed use of controversial weapons in its war on Gaza. The article goes on to describe the types of weapons used in the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip, including dumb bombs, which are unguided munitions, and powerful bombs designed to penetrate hardened structures. The article also mentions the use of white phosphorus, despite its restricted use under international humanitarian law. Human Rights Watch, HRW, has also reported that Israel is deliberately depriving Palestinians of access to food, water and other basic necessities, which is a war crime under international humanitarian law. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your favorite observer from the 6 dimensions here, the 6th Doctor. Today, we've got a whirlwind of news from the Middle East, particularly focused on the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Israel, and Gaza. let's dive right in. First up, we have the UAE, a country that's been making waves with its ambitious goals of becoming a global power. It's been compared to the Medicis of Florence, those famous Italian powerhouses who ruled through trade and banking. But the UAE has its fair share of challenges, like its reliance on oil, the need to decarbonize, regional instability, and competition from its neighbors. Plus, there are questions about its autocratic governance and transactional approach to foreign relations. Will the UAE be able to maintain its stability and alliances in the long run? Time will tell. Moving on to Israel, we've got an interesting analysis of how it could lose America. Israel has long relied on the United States for support, especially during its ongoing conflict with Hamas in Gaza. But lately, there have been signs of strain in the US-Israel relationship, particularly regarding civilian casualties and the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Israel needs to manage its relationship with the US carefully, address domestic political issues, and clarify its position on the Palestinian issue to ensure continued support. After all, there's no viable alternative for Israel when it comes to US support. Now, let's take a look at the recent developments in Iran. The country has executed 4 people on charges of spying for Israel, amidst escalating tensions between the two nations. Both Israel and Iran have been engaged in a shadow war across the Middle East, with accusations and counter-accusations flying around. The recent conflict between Israel and Hamas has only added fuel to the fire, with Iran backing Hamas and Israel pointing fingers at Iran. It's a complicated web of alliances and rivalries that could have serious consequences for the region. Shifting our focus to the investigations into Israel's Gaza offensive, we see 2 Israeli investigations acknowledging the unintentional harm caused by the Israel Defense Forces. The investigations address the criticisms of Israel's offensive, including civilian casualties and the failure to secure the release of hostages. It's a sobering reminder of the human cost of conflicts like these, with innocent lives caught in the crossfire. The situation in Gaza is dire, with a large portion of the population displaced and struggling to access basic necessities. It's a tragic situation that demands attention and action. Speaking of action, the UN has appointed Sigrid Kaag as the Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza. She's got a tough job ahead, coordinating international aid deliveries and establishing mechanisms to speed up deliveries. Her appointment has faced some criticism from Israel due to her past criticisms of Israeli policymaking. It's a delicate balancing act, providing aid while navigating the political sensitivities of the situation. Let's hope Kaag can make a positive difference on the ground. And finally, let's take a lighter look at the recent conflict between Israel and Palestine through the eyes of cartoonists. The Washington Post features cartoons from both Israeli and Palestinian artists, showcasing their different perspectives on the conflict. It's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of violence and turmoil, art can bring people together, revealing shared empathy and humanity. It's a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. So there you have it, folks. A whirlwind tour of the latest news from the Middle East. The UAE's ambitions, Israel's relationship with the US, Iran's tensions, investigations into Israel's offensive, the UN's aid efforts, and the power of cartoons to bridge divides. What a ride! Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you make of these developments? Do you have any questions for the Sixth Doctor? Share your ideas and let's dive into the discussion. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.